The Highlander franchise is kind of amazing when you think about it. Not because it was a massive box office success. Quite the opposite, actually. Despite becoming a cult classic and building a loyal fan base, not a single Highlander movie ever managed to become a real theatrical hit. Every time immortal sword fighters showed up on the big screen, the box office pretty much responded with a polite but firm, no thanks. And yet somehow the franchise itself became immortal. Movies kept getting made. So today, let's take a look at Highlander's bizarre journey through Hollywood. The original Highlander hit theaters in 1986. For the time, it was a pretty expensive movie. Not blockbuster-level expensive, but $16 million was still serious money back then. In fact, Top Gun cost less, and James Cameron's The Terminator almost looked like an indie film by comparison. The first major problem was finding someone willing to play Connor MacLeod. Pretty much everyone the producers approached turned them down. Even Mickey Rourke wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. Kurt Russell came the closest to taking the role, and there's a good chance he would have ended up in the movie if Goldie Hawn hadn't convinced him that Big Trouble in Little China was the better career move. So Kurt grabbed his sword and ran in the opposite direction. With pre-production already underway and no leading man in sight, the filmmakers were running out of options. That's when director Russell Mulcahy brought in Christopher Lambert. The producers were reportedly shocked when they discovered something important after signing him. Lambert didn't speak English at all. Most people would probably consider that a problem when casting the lead in an English-language movie. Mulcahy didn't. His logic was simple. Connor MacLeod was Scottish. If the audience couldn't understand everything he said, maybe that would just make him sound more authentic. Then the production got a lucky break. At the time, Sean Connery's career wasn't exactly at its peak, and he was willing to consider almost any project if the paycheck was large enough. For Highlander, he received $1 million and spent only about a week and a half on set. Connery later described it as one of the most stressful weeks of his acting career because he was nearly stabbed multiple times. The person who came closest to accidentally turning Sean Connery into a historical event was Clancy Brown. Connery, being very much old school, refused to use a stunt double. During one sword fighting scene, Brown got a little too enthusiastic and nearly removed Connery's head. Sean reportedly stormed off set, swearing loudly enough for everyone to hear. When he finally calmed down and came back, he admitted that maybe refusing a stunt double hadn't been his greatest idea. As Connery supposedly put it, losing Sean Connery would have been a disaster for the movie. Losing a stunt double? Well, there were plenty more where they came from. After that incident, Connery apparently developed a new routine. Every day he would gather cast and crew members around him and deliver what was essentially a motivational seminar. During these sessions, he explained how less talented actors could improve their performances, and pointed out which crew members weren't working efficiently enough. According to Connery, productivity improved afterward. Whether everyone else agreed is another question. Unfortunately, improved productivity wasn't enough to save the movie at the box office. Not even a soundtrack created by Queen specifically for the film could pull off that miracle. Domestically, Highlander earned only about $6 million against a $16 million budget. International numbers are harder to track because distribution rights were sold territory by territory, so it's possible the producers made additional money overseas. But reliable figures are almost impossible to find today. And that's where the story probably should have ended. Instead, home video happened. Once Highlander reached VHS, it found a much bigger audience and eventually earned back its production costs. Suddenly, a sequel didn't seem like such a crazy idea. The plan was simple: make the next one bigger and more expensive. Highlander II was originally supposed to arrive in theaters in 1989. If that had actually happened, a lot of what followed might never have happened at all. The project kept getting delayed, partly because Russell Mulcahy signed on to direct Rambo 3. He devoted his attention to Stallone's action sequel right up until the moment Sylvester Stallone fired him for refusing to follow instructions. And this is where Highlander 2 starts feeling like a movie that was simply cursed. As soon as Mulcahy became available again, development moved forward quickly. The studio decided to shoot the film in Argentina. The reasoning seemed perfectly logical. Argentina was cheaper. The exchange rate looked favorable. The producers believed they could save a fortune. Unfortunately, Argentina had other plans. The start of production happened to coincide with major economic reforms introduced by President Carlos Menem. The economy became so unstable that inflation eventually reached around 5,000% by the end of 1989. Businesses were being privatized for what amounted to pennies on the dollar. Unemployment exploded, and decades later, Monem would face legal troubles connected to some of those policies. For the Highlander production, the timing couldn't have been worse. Contracts fell apart, suppliers disappeared, equipment became difficult to obtain, props had to be imported from other countries. The budget started climbing at an alarming rate. The planned $20 million production quickly became a $30 million production. At that point, both the producers and the insurance company noticed their money evaporating and decided it was time to get involved. A movie that had originally been envisioned as something darker slowly began transforming into a more commercial blockbuster. Looking back, timing may have changed everything. If production had started a year earlier, things might have gone very differently. And if Stallone hadn't fired Mulcahy, the delay alone might have saved the movie. By the time Highlander II entered production, the situation in Argentina was becoming impossible to ignore, and the studio probably would have moved the shoot somewhere else entirely. Instead, the chaos only got worse. The script kept changing. Then somebody decided to add aliens. Then somebody else decided the movie needed more jokes. And just to make things even stranger, Back to the Future Part 2 came out. The producers saw those hoverboards and apparently thought, you know what Highlander needs? Some of that. So naturally, they added that too. Michael Ironside later admitted that once he saw the chaos surrounding the script, he basically gave up trying to make sense of it. Instead, he decided to have some fun. If he was going to be stuck in this movie, he figured he might as well enjoy himself by turning the villain into a completely unhinged psychopath. And honestly, he probably succeeded. To this day, his performance is one of the few things people actually remember about Highlander 2. Christopher Lambert wasn't having nearly as much fun. He hated the rewritten script so much that he reportedly tried to leave the project several times. The problem was that his contract made walking away financially impossible. Breaking it would have cost him more money than he could afford. Russell Mulcahy wasn't exactly happy either. At one point, the director became so frustrated that he demanded the producers remove his name from the movie entirely and replace it with Alan Smithee, the famous pseudonym directors used when they wanted nothing to do with a finished film. The producers refused. Technically, Mulcahy's contract prevented him from doing anything that could damage the movie before release, and having the director publicly disown the film probably wouldn't have helped marketing. Ironically, the happiest person involved may have been Sean Connery. Christopher Lambert reportedly insisted on bringing him back, and Connery showed up for just 9 days of work. For those 9 days, he earned $3.5 million. By this point, Connery's career had recovered, and he wasn't interested in getting out of bed for anything less than a serious paycheck. Once the movie was finally finished, another problem appeared. Nobody wanted to distribute it. 20th Century Fox, which had released the original Highlander, knew exactly what had happened during production and wanted absolutely no part of the sequel. Eventually, the producers found a smaller distributor called Interstar, which agreed to put the movie on roughly 1,000 screens across the US. That was enough to get it into theaters. As for Russell Mulcahy, he fulfilled his contractual obligations and attended the premiere for about 15 minutes. Then he left. The director had been locked out of the editing process after his falling out with the producers, meaning the theatrical version was largely someone else's movie. Mulcahy wasn't the only person trying to distance himself from Highlander 2. The cast disowned it too. And eventually, even the franchise itself disowned it. Every future Highlander project pretended the second movie never happened. Fans joked about this so often that Highlander 3 earned an unofficial nickname, Highlander 3: The Apology. Years later, a British distributor allowed Mulcahy to release his own cut of the film. This version runs about 10 minutes longer and comes much closer to the original screenplay. Most importantly, the aliens disappeared. Unfortunately, according to Mulcahy, even that version wasn't the movie he originally set out to make. The box office numbers were just as ugly. Highlander 2 grossed about $15 million worldwide on a $30 million budget. At that point, the owners of the franchise reached a logical conclusion. Maybe Highlander simply belonged on television. A TV series entered development, and Christopher Lambert was offered the lead role. He immediately said no. Eventually, he agreed to appear only in the pilot episode so he could pass the torch to Adrian Paul, and this led to another classic Highlander story. Lambert initially agreed to do the pilot for $50,000. French investors looked at that number and basically said, absolutely not. Offended by the lowballing, Lambert started refusing to participate at all. Then the producers realized that launching a Highlander TV show without Connor MacLeod wasn't the greatest idea. So they came back. This time, Lambert got $500,000. The Adrian Paul series became a major success, lasted 6 seasons, and spawned multiple spin-offs. For the first time in years, Highlander was actually thriving. Unfortunately, television success convinced producers that it was time to return to theaters. Again. In 1994, they launched Highlander III. It became the first Highlander film to receive a PG-13 rating. The previous 2 entries had both been rated R. Unfortunately, it also continued another Highlander tradition: production problems. The script was rewritten so many times that nobody seems entirely sure which draft eventually made it in front of the cameras. Originally, the movie was supposed to be a prequel to the first Highlander. Then things got weird. At the last minute, negotiations with Guns N' Roses collapsed. Director Andrew Morahan had previously directed several music videos for the band and hoped to repeat what Queen had done for the original movie by bringing Guns N' Roses onto the soundtrack. The band loved the idea, at least at first. Then Axl Rose learned that Mario Van Peebles had been cast. Suddenly, he wanted nothing to do with the project. According to reports, Rose refused to participate unless Van Peebles was replaced. Why? Nobody knows. The reason was never publicly explained. The filmmakers couldn't replace him anyway. Christopher Lambert had personally recommended Van Peebles after the two worked together on Gunmen. Lambert enjoyed working with him so much that when a role opened up in Highlander 3, he immediately picked up the phone. Mario said yes. Axl said no. And that was the end of that. When Highlander 3 arrived in theaters in January 1995, it followed the proud franchise tradition of disappointing at the box office. 3 movies, 3 flops, 0 lessons learned. But once again, television kept the franchise alive. The Highlander universe continued expanding through spin-offs, animated projects, and a steady stream of new fans. As a result, the rights kept changing hands, and every new group of investors convinced themselves that they would be the ones to finally crack the code. In that sense, Highlander has a lot in common with Terminator. No matter how many times things go wrong, somebody always believes they'll be the person who gets it right. That belief led to Highlander 4. This time, the plan was to unite the movie version of Highlander with the television version, and hopefully bring both fan bases into theaters. One of the most interesting stories surrounding the film involves the villain. The role was reportedly offered to Belgium's greatest practitioner of cinematic ballet, Jean-Claude Van Damme. By that point, Van Damme was already spending a lot of time in lower-budget action movies, but he still wasn't interested in playing a bad guy. At least that's the official story. The role eventually went to Bruce Payne. Unfortunately, Payne arrived on set and almost immediately became seriously ill. He spent months receiving treatment, which is why a stunt double ends up replacing him in a surprising number of scenes. Highlander 4 also became one of the earliest examples of a movie trailer that sold audiences a film that didn't actually exist. The trailer featured numerous scenes that never appeared in the finished movie. At the time, people assumed those scenes had simply been cut. Years later, the filmmakers admitted the truth. They had intentionally shot footage specifically for the trailer because they wanted the movie to look bigger, more expensive, and more exciting than it really was. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. On a budget of $25 million, Highlander 4 grossed only about $15 million worldwide. After that, television got one more Highlander movie starring Adrian Paul. Judging by its reviews, it's the kind of experience you should only attempt if you're actively looking for ways to damage your eyesight. There was also an anime adaptation, but it never generated much excitement either. And that finally brings us to today. After decades of box office failures, spin-offs, alternate cuts, TV shows, and enough continuity problems to fill several timelines, Highlander is preparing for another trip to theaters. This time, the project is being directed by Chad Stahelski, the filmmaker behind John Wick. Henry Cavill is set to play Connor MacLeod. Production began in early 2026 across Scotland, London, and other locations. The new film is being positioned not simply as a remake, but as the beginning of an entirely new saga centered around the Immortals. According to the filmmakers, the movie will preserve many of the elements fans loved about the original, including music from Queen. The current target is a 2027 release. So, what do you think? Will Highlander finally break the curse and become a box office success? Or is the franchise about to prove once again that while Immortals may live forever, theatrical flops can apparently do the same. That was Frameback. Subscribe for more rewinds and see you on the next one.